Okay, so the purpose of this video will be to take a look at ecology and specifically to describe the levels of ecological organization. And so this looks at organisms, populations, community, ecosystem, biome, and biosphere. So what is ecology? Well, ecology is going to be the study of the interaction among organisms and between organisms and the physical environment. It's going to look at energy and nutrients and how those move through an ecosystem, and it's going to study all of those interactions that we see. So when we look at levels of ecological organization from smallest to biggest, we start with the individual, and then we move to population. A little bit bigger than that would be community, and then ecosystem, and then biome, and then biosphere. So a definition for this, the individual would be an organism, and that specifically would be an individual within a species. So really the lowest level would be a species. This would be a group of similar organisms that can breed and produce fertile offspring. Many individuals, a group of individuals of the same species that are in the same area and they're reproducing together, would be considered to be a population. Whenever we look in a certain specific area and we look at different populations, so we look at the fish population and the crab population, and we look at the grass because that's also a living factor. But a community is looking at all the living factors or biotic factors that are going to be interacting in a certain shared environment. Now, if we start looking at the living components and the non-living components, so the abiotic factors, whenever we start looking at the non-living components, then we are starting to talk about an ecosystem. So it's still going to be a system that has organisms and non-living organisms in the same environment. A step bigger than that would be a biome, and so this will be a large area or a geographical region that has distinct plant and animal groups that are adapted specifically to that environment. And so when we talk about a biome, we can compare a biome that might be in one geographical area and then a very similar geographical region in a different part of the planet. They are going to, like we talked about with evolution, have organisms that are very similar because they have similar factors and similar abiotic components that contribute to what the biotic or the living factors, the plants and animals, are going to be. Whenever we look at the biosphere, we're talking about everything on Earth, all of the ecosystems, all of the biomes, and kind of how they all interact together. So when we look at abiotic and biotic factors. Biotic factors are biological influences on an organism. So these are plants, animals, food sources, and abiotic factors are physical components of an ecosystem. They're non-living. So this is how much sunlight is there, what's the general temperature and the heat, what's the precipitation, what are the currents like, what's the soil like, what kind of rocks are there. So abiotic factors are all of those physical features that are non-living features. Inside of an environment will be all the conditions or factors that are going to influence an organism. So whenever we think of biotic and abiotic factors, all of those are coming together to impact a certain environment, and whenever we look at a certain spot, we're talking about an ecosystem. So abiotic conditions, if we think of how these influence, abiotic conditions like the soil could be influenced by biotic factors. So for example, if plants are living around a shoreline, they might grow really tall, and they might be tall enough to impact the amount of sun that shines through, which then impacts the temperature and the humidity, and so on. Now, if we just take a look quickly at biomes, biomes are going to be a large area or geographical region that have distinct plant and animal groups that are adapted to that environment. And so just wanted to briefly mention this because it goes and ties back to evolution and natural selection, because we're talking about how the climate will impact what the plant and animal communities look like, where they live, and the different adaptations that they have and how they will be fit to survive. We'll take a look at this more throughout the unit, but I think it's important to highlight this feature as well.